So many good memes.
True. Where's it?
Oh, there it is.
Is it showing up?
Yeah.
We're doing it live.
Ooh, I like the purple. See, what's funny is I can't see you until you go live.
It's because we're doing it live. Okay, I don't even see YouTube. Oh, hello, Sarab. Thank you for saying hello, so I know that it's actually coming through. All right, sweet. Here we are. Hello, Travis. Good morning. Sorry for not getting back in touch with you on Wednesday. It was a very busy day. I had an extra call towards the end of the day, and needed to help out David. Yeah, good news. New headphones and new Shure X2U. I think the sound quality's improved.
Yeah.
Markedly. So
unfortunately not on my end.
No, it's fine. Sounds good.
So I have to HD up my voice.
All right. Are we ready to begin?
Ready? Okay, did you send me the notes?
I send it. It's not really notes. It's actually just a spreadsheet this week.
Where'd you send it?
In the Google chat. In the.
Okay. This is great TV.
It's great TV. Sitting here watching us watch each other. All right, here we go. So I'm going to dive in. So the monologue this morning is going to be a little different than normal. Not scripted as much. It's a bunch of chicken scratch on a notebook. So here we go. Slavoj Žižek, in his debate with Jordan B. Peterson, came across really scatterbrained and kind of all over the place. And at first, I was really just not following what he was doing. And I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but it hit me as he got later into this debate how much of his ideas he was connecting together. It was almost like he was unveiling something, kind of like George R.R. Martin's storytelling in a way, kind of like this. He put something over here, put some over here, put some over here, or any ensemble narrative. You can think of these modern movies like Crash, or a lot of these Oscar winners like to do that, Babel, where you just get all these little different stories and then all of a sudden they connect together. It's this fragmented approach to telling story. And I was really impressed with his argumentation. And it hit me. I feel like a friend of mine wrote this, but I'm not entirely sure. Or if he didn't write it, he referenced it. Josh Crute, he was one time talking about, I think he wrote an essay comparing Tolstoy and Citizen Kane, of all things. There's a scene in Citizen Kane in which Charles Foster Kane, played by Orson Welles, is walking through this hall of mirrors. And you see multiple images of him. And there's another scene in a later Orson Welles film, is it The Third Man? It's not The Third Man. The Chimes at Midnight? No, it's not The Chimes at Midnight. Man, I'm blanking on which one it is. But at the end, Orson Welles' character, it's not his, oh man, I'm blowing this. There's another hall of mirrors, basically like a funhouse mirror sort of scenario. And the villainous characters just start shooting the love interest, but it's all these fake images of her and just keeps falling down.
The lady from Shanghai?
The lady from Shanghai, thank you. Rita Hayworth, I think.
Yeah.
That is through art getting at this whole postmodernist deconstruction of ideas and how we feel fragmented as societies. My favorite band, Radiohead, is all about isolation, disconnection. But through that, they've managed to weave a tapestry of music that I really appreciate. A lot of modern music, you can hear it, a lot of modern art. There's just something disjointed about a lot of it, right? But what I appreciate about Slavoj Žižek's debate with JBP was I started seeing meaning in the fragments. And I think one of the things, the weaknesses of the internet, the weaknesses of our age, our digital age, is that we've broken concrete things or beautiful things down into these little binary bits. But if you get enough of them and you can take a step back, you can start seeing the pieces fit together. One of the books I think talks about this best was written by Marshall McLuhan. I'm going to read a little bit of this. This is in the introduction to Marshall McLuhan's Gutenberg Galaxy. McLuhan elaborated a new way of looking at our habitat. He combined scholarly background, knowledge of contemporary literature and art, as well as pop culture to explore what was going on around him and to alert his readers to the ongoing cultural processes. With the Gutenberg Galaxy, he showed us that only an integrated approach brings together different domains which contribute to our understanding of the wholeness of the then electric and now internet and digital age. So just think about that. McLuhan back then was recognizing this fragmentation even before we had the internet, as even more fragmenting us and getting these little tiny pockets of information. You think about the difference between Twitter and a newspaper. It's just these little tiny little bits of information. And Marshall McLuhan was seeing it back then, that we have to have an integrated approach. We can't just any longer have a specialist approach. Consistently, he insisted that in the information age, the specialist is an anachronism, someone that, according to him, never makes small mistakes while moving toward the grand fallacy. Straining at gnats, swallowing camels, getting everything right down to science, down to perfection. A lot of these complaints about Game of Thrones season 8 are viable, and some of them are not so viable. You need something, buddy?
Talking to me?
No, my son just walked in. He's uh-oh. And they're live. A lot of the complaints that people will throw at showrunners or writers or filmmakers, they're straining at gnats. They're like pretending to be specialists. These aren't specialists, or armchair specialists, but they're like, oh, well, you broke the 5 C's of cinematography with that sequence right there. There's 5 C's of cinematography are not written in stone. They're not written in the heavens. It's not a law of nature. Grammar does not apply across all cultures. These aren't immutable rules. And you try to apply Aristotle again to a story that doesn't make any pretensions to follow Aristotelian plot structure, then new wine for new wineskins. So again, consistently insisted that in the information age, the specialist is an anachronism. It's old-fashioned. It's an old way of looking at the world. It will no longer apply in an integrated information age. He reconsidered the idea of education and refused the compartmentalized academic methods of investigation, since they no longer mirrored the new reality. To observe the electric simultaneity through the rear view mirror of linearity would imply to rely upon a distorted version of reality. So I was thinking about this morning. When I tried to write my memoir, I was trying to write this self-help book, Building a Better Me. And I just kept hitting these walls. And I'm like, I just don't know how to connect this chapter to this other chapter. There's just no connection there. Every time I tried to do it, it felt forced. It just felt contrived.
Okay.
And it hit me that in our age, really, we should just be throwing all these things out there. And the internet provides us that opportunity. You should use the internet more as a cloud, as it is. And from the cloud, you can start piecing together. It's like looking clouds. You can start to see shapes. And you can kind of see what you're wanting to see. And from there, you can kind of make connections. You can make constellations from the points of light. If you're thinking about stargazing. So I have more of a stargazing approach to coming up with your unique contribution in terms of whether it's like in your field of expertise, whether it's in your work, whether it's in your philosophy or your politics or your economics, whatever it is. Like, think of it like trying to piece together constellations instead of taking this linear approach that I need to move from A to B. I need to write a book. I need to make a movie. These linear things actually do better when when you have a rich tapestry of ideas to pull from. And on the
Mhm.
internet, we should be in the internet age rather than writing a rough draft that's linear. Like, just forget it. Make the rough draft everything you do. Make it your Instagram feed, make it your Twitter feed, make it your SoundCloud. Like, integrate all these things. Like, just throw them up there and integrate them over time. Iterate before you integrate, I guess, is a good way to think of it. Linearity is, in our day and age, in this post-fragmented age, is not a good structure for drafts, outlines, plans. Really, just spitballing is a good place to start. So, I like to think of the internet that it could be as a hypothetical proving ground, like a compost pile for fully formed ideas to gestate, evolve, emerge, and metamorphosize. Is that a word?
Yeah, let's say it is.
Metamorphicate.
Yeah, I like the first one better.
Metamorphosize. So this week was a hard week of work, and I'm going to read one thing I did write a while back. This has kind of colored my whole depression, ennui, since I left India. And this is very depressing. I've read it before on the channel. I don't think I've read it in this podcast. I'll share it with you, Judah, here. So this is one of the last things I wrote before leaving India, and I just felt this sense of powerlessness is the word. Just inability to make any decisions of my own, that my decisions weren't not even mine, that I kind of just felt backed against the wall, and I couldn't blame anybody, and myself was part of the problem. So this is what I wrote. It's April 14th, 2016. We arrived in India 5 years ago. I no longer have the energy or resolve to do this anymore. I have failed in almost every perceivable way. I think my intentions were pure, but I can't really see anything clearly anymore. There are moments when things seem to make sense, and I find myself capable of hoping that something other than the prisoner's dilemma and politics can characterize life on this earth. But life is much harder than we pretend that it is in America, and our entitled privilege blinds us to just how ruthless natural selection, Murphy's Law, and capricious fate are in the real world. People can complain all they want about minimum wage and racism and inequality in America. We are so domesticated, so unwittingly subsidized by previous economic, medicinal, and technological innovations that we have no clue what reality looks like. I get glimpses of the savage horror on occasion over here, and everything I've attempted to throw at it has proven to be comically ill-advised and naive. I'm a stuffed animal keychain flailing before Leviathan. It doesn't even bother to eat me. I am so inconsequential it just prefers to let me witness its unrelenting dominance and prove my whimsical hope for what it is, a pie-in-the-sky delusion, like every one of my creative ideas. I have lost, I have failed, I see no way forward, and I have no clue what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. I can promise one thing: if all of us do not make some serious changes, Leviathan is coming for all of us. And no amount of first world problem, comfort, and entitlement will protect us when he does. But I have no proposed solution. I think it's too late anyway. We sold our souls long ago and have been biding our time until our master would come and reclaim his place. So this week, while I was working, and I'm working a menial job, it's hard. It's the hardest work I've ever done. I had one 16-hour day this week, followed by an 11-hour day, and I was just exhausted, and we're carrying out demolition debris, putting it in a dumpster. There's drywall dust everywhere. And I've been trying to figure out, like, I use the term Leviathan, and that's just a metaphor. It's a dragon of some kind. I don't know what the dragon stands for. And I've been trying to, we talked about it, calling it like the Christmas cathedral. I've used the word consumerism a lot. A lot of people, when they say this, they talk about capitalism. They blame it on the C word, on capitalism. I just think that's a little too cheap and not specific enough. David Simon blamed it on capitalism as Olympian god. I actually like that pretty good. Like that's not bad. I still think it's a little bit inarticulate. I think consumerism as Olympian god, I like that a lot better.
corporate capitalism. I've heard.
Corporate capitalism that appeals to short-sighted consumerism. I think, that's probably the most articulate way to put it.
But the best way is Christmas
Cathedral.
Christmas Cathedral.
Christmas Cathedral. Christmas California Cathedral, I think was the whole idea.
Yeah.
Go west, go west, go west. So, but as I was sitting there throwing stuff in that dumpster, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. We are in debtor's prison. All of us who are working menial jobs, some of us even having white collar posh jobs, we're in debt. We're in debt to somebody and we don't realize it. We're in debt to some company, even if we're not in debt. Like I'm in debt to Adobe because I'll be paying them for the next 3 years for a subscription. Like we are in a debtor prison that's comfortable. So, and the best person to talk about comfort as a means of taking away somebody's will is Aldous Huxley. And you really can't understand me without understanding Aldous Huxley's influence on me. Brave New World changed the way I looked at the world. I mean, up until reading Brave New World, it was like the Bible. That was probably it. I didn't really have much more. I was raised as a Christian, and I really didn't have much more breadth. And when I read Brave New World, I was like, oh, this is America. 1984, Orwell's warning of dystopia was more of a commentary on control by terror, control by violence. But Brave New World's about control by appealing to people's desires. There's a great interview with Aldous Huxley by Mike Wallace, of all people, back in 1958 or so. And you can see this video on YouTube. It's called Aldous Huxley Described Today's World 57 Years Ago. Fantastic little video here. I don't agree with him on everything he said. Some of what he was worried about didn't prove to be true, but about 90% of it proved to be true. So he talks about the dictatorship of the future not being like Orwell's concern. The dictatorship of the future, according to Aldous Huxley, was something you could describe as an old dictum that he referenced, that these people who sit in power using terror or violence, you can do anything with bayonets except sit on them, which I think is pretty good. That's kind of reflected in Game of Thrones, actually, especially the final episode. You can do anything with bayonets except sit on them. Violence is only a tool for gaining power. It's not so great at retaining power. So if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do by bypassing rational faculties and appealing to subconscious emotions and physiology. Make the ruled happy so they want you to stay in power. Happy in situations in which they should not be. And he says that the ruled in this Brave New World, in which he predicted, he said this was coming to America. It was probably already in process at the time of that interview, that people would be persuaded below the level of choice and reason. And he talks about democracy. And, we talk about democracy a lot. And he says, well, democracy can be undercut because democracy hinges on individuals voting. Democracy hinges on individual voters making intelligent and rational choices for what they regard as their enlightened self-interest. And I think that those two words are key. We talk a lot about in this whole surfing violinist thing, these opposites, enlightenment, but still self-interest. Like you can't, if you're self-interested only, you will be short-sighted. But if you're enlightened, you'll see the bigger picture and realize, I don't want to just take everything away from everyone. I want to grow everyone. But this system bypasses the rational side, this Brave New World. It bypasses the rational side to appeal to unconscious forces below the surface, so in a way making nonsense of the entire democratic procedure, which is based on conscious choice on rational grounds. Conscious choice, rational grounds. And so much of what we do is just unconscious. If you go back and look at the YouTube trending tab, conscious and rational, not the first things that are going to come to your mind when you look at how bottom line that stuff is. You're not going to find any the Beatles, on the trending tab. You're not going to find Debussy. You're not going to find Beethoven. You're not going to find the best thinkers of our day, right? And they're there. They're there on YouTube, but they're not going to be on the trending tab. And when he was asked, like, who do you think's behind this? Because, we always kind of like to have like this, believe there's this cabal of, evil people sitting behind the scenes pulling all the strings. And so Huxley didn't take that easy way out. He said, I don't think there are any sinister persons that are trying to rob other people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces that are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes, can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom and imposing control. So the Tao Te Ching, I quote this all the time. There's Neil Postman who turned me onto this in his introduction to Brave New World Revisited. It has this quote. It says, empty their minds, fill bellies. The best way to rule a people. Empty their minds, fill their bellies, weaken their wills, strengthen their bones. And I think for our purposes, it's best not to think of it in a physical sense. It's better to think of it in a mental sense. Empty our minds of wisdom, curiosity, epistemology, and scientific inquiry, and fill our minds with dopamine addiction. That's the best way. To weaken our wills and strengthen our short-sighted wants. So to replace will with want. And you think about what will is, and it's conscious choice. It's conscious choice on rational grounds, just what Aldous Huxley was talking about. And more we have equated will and want with one another. But if you can't say no to your wants, then you don't have will. You're a program entity. You're an animal. You're instinctual. So as Littlefinger said in the books to Sansa in the Game of Thrones books, everyone wants something, and when you know what a man wants, you know who he is and how to move him. And then contrarily, in the Game of Thrones, even the humblest pieces can have wills of their own. Sometimes they refuse to make the moves you've planned for them. Mark that well. It's a lesson that Cersei Lannister still has yet to learn. So, all that to say that if it is not necessarily your place in a class structure, it's not necessarily your opportunity, because Game of Thrones shows that. Rich people, princes, kings, queens, they end up being so overridden by their wants and their desires that they become easy pawns in someone else's game. Don't let your wants become your will. And so for the surfing violinist, for me, this job is teaching me that even though I am in a sense in debtor's prison, like paying for a car that I don't own, I shouldn't have gotten sucked into. The marketing blitz worked. I was like, I want to have this car, and then it's like 3 years of paying the thing off. I can't afford to buy it all at once. Even though I'm in debtor's prison, and it seems like there's really no way out, it's actually better to go to hell, so to speak, to just choose willingly to say no to my short-term wants, so that my will be sharp. And that's how you really sharpen your will, is by saying no to the things that really aren't dependent. Be independent. Like, you can't be free until you're free of yourself. And so I think so many of these revolutionary ideals are always going to end up falling into Brave New World. Once we have, Leviathan really is the technology and the advancements we've made. And we've equated these advancements as necessities, and some of them are not, and some of them actually kind of hinder us. So this job, for instance, a lot of the stuff that is starting to dawn on me after years is working with my hands, like these connections, those little pinpoints of life, of light. Constellations are forming because not just my mind is working, but my body is working, and some of these things just pop into my head. And so I went and found that while I was working. I just listened to Aldous Huxley, and that's the great thing. You don't even have to go to college anymore. You get this idea of like, oh, I wonder if Aldous Huxley's has been. I never even heard his voice before. So I got to hear a talk with Aldous Huxley from 50 years ago. Everything is up now. There's a Alan Watts talk about Aldous Huxley's book, The Island. It's 4 parts, like 4 hours long on YouTube. So I listened to that for an hour. Just fascinating stuff. And so we have access to that. And if you work a menial job, the benefit is you can go to college. You can go to college while you're sitting there doing menial stuff. Yeah. That's exactly what Littlefinger's saying. You can be in a humble position, but that means you don't have to worry about the man ever thinking that you're a threat, And the game we're playing now is, again, I think it is better than what came before because mediated by money. It's easy to be instead of mediated by swords. Money is better than swords. Money is better than bayonets.
Yeah.
Harsh back again. Special thanks to Harsh for the donations these last 3 weeks, single-handedly subsidizing this podcast. Thank you. And everyone can say thanks to Harsh because we've got a new Shure X2U connector, so there's no more moments like last week that almost broke everyone's eardrums. And also new headphones because the other ones literally broke right after the episode just fell apart. So we got some new equipment. So thanks to Harsh. If you would like to support the Surfing Violinist podcast, you can do so through Patreon. We are not running this week, but we will start in June. If you do not want to be charged, you better get out now while you still can.
Get out. First of all,
yes,
I blame myself. I was re-listening to the podcast last week, and you're like, tell them to, I don't know, tell them to take off their headphones or whatever. I was like, and I was just kind of in a daze. I was just like, take off your sound or something. I can't remember. I didn't warn anybody.
Oh.
So I'm sorry for not warning anybody.
Yeah, I still got to edit that and get that podcast up.
So about the monologue.
Okay. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to say. Oh,
okay, yeah.
Okay, so the way I kind of see this podcast eventually, I have had the chance to host a couple live events, two Comic Cons in India, and I realized that it can be kind of invigorating, but oftentimes MCs, Masters of Ceremonies, it's like it's gotten frivolous again because of our appeal to lowest common denominators. There's just a lot of filler in so much of what we do in the modern day and age, where we don't, like McLuhan said, he warned, the medium is the message, and if we're not careful, we will become dumb in the process. So you really need to take special effort to make being like a master of ceremonies actually have meaning. And so I was thinking really what we're doing here in a sense is like being a master of ceremonies. I've got, a bunch of different little things and we're bringing it all together. But master is not a great word. And ceremony is also kind of lost its meaning if you think about it. Most of our ceremonies and festivals have just become kind of just desiccated. They just don't seem to have the magic they used to. So the point of this podcast is for curation, conversation, and what I'm going to call peer-reviewed intellectual exploration. Peer-reviewed meaning we're all peers. I'm not saying that you have to go to college. I'm not saying you have to be of a certain class. Just you're a human being. You're a peer to me. So, and the wisdom of the peers will be subjected to the wisdom of the peers. And yeah, so, but peer-reviewed intellectual exploration. So instead of a master of ceremonies, an MC, I'm proposing that our roles, me and you, Judah, is be FMCs, facilitators of meaning curation. What do you think?
What was the first word?
Facilitators.
The facilitators.
Facilitators of meaning curation, instead of being like masters of empty ceremony.
Well, you've always used that word curator when it comes to, remember when you used to do Found on Facebook and stuff like that?
That's true. I was doing this all, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It was right when I first left for India, I think.
And I've always appreciated that term. So yes, yes.
Curating meaning, not just like, there's a time for frivolity, and there's a time for fun, and there's a time for, you know, luxury and pleasure, and all these things are good, and we want to like tap into all of it. But I think if you look on the internet, it is just, oh, I mean, it's just been the same thing since we got these powerful tools, starting with the printing press. Since we got that, the first thing it's going to always go to is the most superficial, frivolous, bottom line, bottom of the barrel sorts of things. But it's 2019. I mean, come on, come on. Like
Meme culture.
We can do better. So, okay. So thoughts on the monologue?
All right. Well, the first part about Zizek made me think of a good friend of my father's. I can't remember his name. He was in his band when he was in college. Kenny Arbuck. It just came to me. No, Kenny. I can't remember. He's an amazing guitarist, musician, and he once said that in a melody, the relevance of each note, the quality, the relevance, right? Like there's a possibility that you don't have the wrong note because each note is dependent on the next. So you hit a bad note, you can bring it back into into relevance with the next note.
That's pretty good.
And often I enjoy people. I think you have this cadence and when you're talking that meaning comes not as a very clearly outlined essay, but as a melody. And I think we need to speak more. I think we need to have like you said, there's a time for everything, but there's definitely a time to speak in melodies, to speak in moments, but making sure that each moment gives relevance to the last.
That's really good because I'll play some more improv. I'm doing more improv, just off the cuff violin stuff than I ever did before. As a classically trained violinist where everything's written, it's just, this is the law. You're not deviating from this. And when you do improv, and I'm not proficient with the traditional rock scales, blues riffs and everything. I just, and I've never really tried to apply them properly. And so I've kind of just stumbled into some of those things, which is, I think, what a lot of that music did. All of them, they stumbled into things and they played it because they liked it. And they're like, oh, that was a fun thing. I lost you. Are you there, Judah? I lost Judah. We'll see where he is. 1 second. I kind of want to keep him back in the thing. Are y'all still seeing me? Let me know if you're still seeing me in the chat. I'm sorry, I lost a video. Check. Anyone there? Hello. Okay, it looks like I'm still up. Are you there?
Am I back?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Hush. Okay.
Sorry, I had an error on my end. So yeah, I mean that's the purpose.
Yeah, but I got like to a place where it's a new song or something like that, and we're playing live, and there's people watching, and I hit a note that's out of the key, and then I'm like, and then the only way to really do it is just to hit play it again, like in the next attempt at the phrase, and then you add something to it, and then people are like, oh, he planned to do that, and then that's how what sounded bad at first ends up sounding good. Like
that's jazz. That's
jazz exactly is. And so jazz, it really changed everything. I mean, you want to talk about one of the most influential art forms of the last century. It's jazz, and you can see it everywhere now in culture. We went to a craft beer bar to watch my buddy Anthony play last night, and this type of beers they have. Like, what idiot came up with this idea? Who thought this would be a good idea? And I like it. It's like, who thought that would be? That's just the stupidest mix you could possibly. This is like taking like cranberry juice and mixing it with milk. Like, why would you ever do this? This is terrible.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Human invention. That's the reminds me, of course, of the Calvin and Hobbes, where he says, "Who looked at a cow and said, I'm gonna drink whatever comes out of that."
Totally true. Thanks, Jared. I was talking with a buddy from work. We were on a long drive,
Mhm.
and we were talking about how we developed some of these more strange ideas for drinks or drugs. And who was the idiot that thought that mushroom would be okay to eat? Like, and how did these people survive? How did we all survive? There's a certain and someone mentioned this, I think, on one of the Rogan podcasts, that there is a really, really technical and delicate order of operations in a certain tribe somewhere where it's like 18 steps to get this substance that they drink. And if you get any one of those steps wrong, it's lethal.
Wow.
How do you get that? So, I mean, it just goes to show scientific inquiry. Tribes were even doing it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that you don't just like luck upon that. I mean, I guess you can get pocket aces every now and then, but just the amount of people that had to die in order to figure that 18 steps out, it's insane. And it's like in India, like one of the big things that's famous around the world is India's tiffin delivery service. Like, they deliver lunches in Mumbai, and you look at their organization methods, and it seems so primitive, but it's so refined and elegant. And
Yeah.
they manage to, it's like they're database managers. They're like database admins of actual substances, but they're doing it without having ever done MySQL or NoSQL or any database thing. And also, I've seen that personally. I've never experienced that in India, in Mumbai, but in Delhi, parking, you'll come up to this guy and he's got this key ring with like 100 keys on it.
That gives me anxiety.
Yeah,
Thinking about
a key ring with 100 keys on it, and they triple, quadruple, octuple park cars, and you're like, I'm gonna be forever. And somehow they get to. You're like, I'm serious. Like, people at like Caesar's Palace need to go study how these dudes somehow, like, through this jazz improvisational database management thing, managed to park people's cars in these tiny little parking lots. It's weird, man. It's weird.
Well, and so that gets to my next point. So about the fragmentation and it's the sort of the schizophrenia of the internet. I watched this fascinating video. I think I have it up here. I spent a week in a VR headset. Here's what happened. So this dude chronicles on this video.
Oh, interesting.
What it's like for him. He'd take it off to like brush his teeth or something like that, but he could see through it. He could turn it on so he could see through it like glasses sometimes. He had to do, but for a whole week he just lived in this VR world. And at first, oh man, he was like making interesting connections, but by the end he just felt dehumanized. And I think this comes back. So how do people look at things and figure out life? They don't do it on the internet. They do it like the reason civilization has been able to figure these things out, I believe, is because of the magic of nature. Mm-hmm. The way that nature is the organism of nature, it's so well organized. It's so the processes and the mechanisms that you see there, there's a magic in it.
It's so elegant. It's insane. Elegant. You look at how most companies, businesses, politics, the bureaucracies and logistics, they are like what is the word, malfunctioning rudimentary robots in comparison to just the elegance of some of these chemical processes in nature, or the way the fungi works. It's some insane stuff. Where the way ecosystems work, I really think we need to have a more, rather than like a trivial, and I know people do this, and a lot of our innovations come from this. Instead of this trivial, like, how did we get here view of biology, or how did this, species come about, or whatever. It's like, what can this teach us about management? What can this teach us about organization? What can this teach us about sociological structures? There's a lot of bad things in nature that we do not need to duplicate. People are always saying, I hate humanity. Look at the natural world. It's like, man, you're not looking close enough at the natural world. Whatever. Like, one of my coworkers, she was telling me that they were watching the Blue Planet or one of those, and these orcas chased down a blue whale, and who has their baby blue whale with them. And they just chase until the mother whale runs out of energy and just can't defend the baby anymore.
Oh,
So the
man.
orcas, do they eat the whale? They ate out its tongue and they left it to die.
My God.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
brutal.
it's not just humans that have these weird, like, veal or caviar, like these expensive tastes. Like we did not inject this. So you cannot look at nature and imbue reality with this. Everyone should be, free, and everyone should be provided for. Like, that's not how it works in nature. Okay.
Right.
So we want it to be that way, but we cannot just merely by fiat declare this stuff.
Right. But while at the same time, though, the good and the bad of nature, right? We don't want to be like nature, but so often the people that are saying we want to be like nature have never spent time in nature,
Right.
have never felt the gravity, the stakes of
The
nature.
stakes. That's the thing. The stakes, the warnings. And so,
Yeah.
but we need both sides. And in order to get to that world, that perfect utopia in which, no one is going to be left behind, in which, the weak and the downtrodden will have a truly equal voice, not a theoretically equal voice. Like, to get to that, we need to learn lessons from nature. And there's plenty of lessons there. It's just staring us in the face. I mean, it's like right there. There's so many just interesting things. So one of the things that they mentioned, and it was that Paul Stamets episode of Joe Rogan. He's the fun guy expert. I think we've already made that joke like 8 times. So the Japanese had, in order to, I think they were trying to figure out a better way to route their subway system, and in a certain area. And so what they did is they took a nutrient and they put it at the nodes where they wanted these certain stops to be, but they weren't sure what array of other stops they should have to connect this most efficiently. So they put these little nutrients there, and they let this certain species of fungi or mushroom or mold to work its way across. And wouldn't you know it, the fungi figured it out better than humans had figured it out.
Wow.
So there are things that we take for granted. We think we're smart, but we're also very emotional. We're also very impetuous. We're also very distracted. So we should conserve what came before us and see what it has to teach us. And then see if it can be used as a tool. And we need to think of the internet also as a tool, not as a place to live. And I think that's the problem. When we find a tool that really works, whether it be the pen and paper, whether it be the printing press, whether it be a gun, like Full Metal Jacket's a great movie about the gun as God. That's what the movie is about, the bullet as God, the Full Metal Jacket. And when you treat your gun as, forgive me, but I mean, this is what the movie's about. When you treat your gun as your penis, like, basically, what you're sowing, the seed you sow is death. And so I'm not a pacifist, but that movie is talking about if you treat that as God rather than a tool. A gun can be a tool in the proper place, but trying to keep things in their proper places, very difficult. And again, to the people who are like, oh, guns are bad. It's like, okay, well, we threw rocks before we had guns. We used bows and arrows before we had guns. We had catapults. You want to go back to pairs of anguish? I mean, come on, like, read some history, please. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Harsh, another 20-pound donation from Harsh, single-handedly. He says this. Good comment here. I think you were right about human perspective on nature. If you get time, watch a TED talk by Brett Weinstein on capitalism from an evolutionary perspective. That would be very interesting. I would definitely like to see that. Okay, that'll be on our list. You think you might be able to check that out this week,
Oh,
Jordan? All
absolutely.
right, we
Especially
will check it out and give a comment on that next week. Weinstein's he's an interesting dude. So that'll be
intellectual
intellectual
dark
dark
web.
web. Yeah, interesting dude. And again, I think it comes back to that whole thing that in Gutenberg Galaxy that McLuhan was getting at, that just having a broad range of these understandings can really help get a more robust and resilient perspective on life, because
Yeah.
you're not just kind of like doing this little balancing act and trying to keep everything just so, you know.
Well, it's so evident in this. So the guy who did it, Disrupt, is his YouTube channel is Disrupt. I'd go check it out. I spent a week in a VR headset. Here's what happened. You see so clearly how interesting, but how plastic and vacant the internet really is. Like
Well,
there's no.
It can be. I mean, I don't think what we're doing right here is plastic and vacant.
No,
You know.
no, but it would be if we tried, if this is all we did. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you see all these, because this is the thing, is that at first he has these meaningful connections,
Oh, okay. I got
and
you.
but like after a while, it's like you start to feel the franticness of not being able to get out of, like I wanted to stop watching the video,
Oh,
you know.
interesting. Gotcha.
It started making me feel like, oh, so yeah, so as a tool we can have richness,
Yeah.
we can see glimpses of greatness and connection, but as a world to live in, it's so
Right.
empty.
Right. A recommendation off the top of my head here is Nero's album. 2808 is what it's. Welcome Reality, I think, is the name of the entire album. Back in 2011 or so.
I love Nero. I
Nero
love Nero.
28. I think that's what it is. Welcome Reality, yeah, August 2011. So it's basically a soundtrack to a movie that's not really a movie. There's no movie to go along with it. Someone should definitely make it. But there's a couple of them, these tracks that are basically the person booting into the Matrix, so to speak. It's like the second reality or whatever, like Second Life sort of scenario. And you really get that, yeah, cyberpunk feel. And that's something I think we really just continually have to meditate on to some degree, whether it be in like William Gibson's Neuromancer or Philip K. Dick. Just need to keep thinking of the warnings. Again, like we look at the warnings in nature, we look at the promises. We look at the warnings in science fiction, we look at the promises. You know, like to balance out your Star Trek Next Generation with its optimism, you do need some Philip K. Dick, you know, on the other side just to kind of balance it out. And Aldous Huxley, I mean, he's the granddaddy. Like I just realized how much of what he was saying, really, Philip K. Dick is kind of riffing on some of what he's saying too. So yeah, some good stuff to think about.
And then the last thing I wanted to say is I had a interesting conversation. I had a deep conversation that sort of it made me think of our discussions while you were talking about while you were reading the Leviathan. Of course, I've read that before. We've talked about it, and so I was talking to a friend of mine. I think I sent you a message about a friend of mine, Jason, who he wants to go into India. He wants to be a missionary in India, and but we were talking about the reality of failure, and I told him, like, I didn't really understand Leviathan, your little piece, until recently when I decided to quit or to move on from working with the Becoming a Man program, you know, because I have such a desire and such a I want to make I really want to be a part of change in the lives of young men who are hurting, you know, young men of color, young men of disadvantage. But it's not working out where I'm at, and and I feel this sense of like I got 70 students I'm working with, and it's just I feel like I can't do enough for each one. Of course, there's that savior complex, all this stuff, all
Right.
it's all the simultaneous stuff, the the guilt about that, and then the desire to see, and so what we talked about though, because so I feel like a failure coming out of it because I never, even though I made a difference here or whatever there, coming at it, I feel like what have I done? You know, I didn't. I have nothing to show for it. And we talked about how, like, as men, how hard it is to just be faithful.
Yeah, I would say a couple things here. So earlier, someone had asked this question. I hope he's still there. I am the best. 1, 2, 3. Is there anything? Can you do something about depression?
Hmm.
One thing. I mean, This was a very depressing week for me. I really have to just hunker down and work at this job, and I was having some just frustrations and didn't really want to do this. Uh, Honestly, the physical aspect of it is the thing that I mind least.
Hmm.
I didn't actually want to be put into a middle leadership position where I was actually, having to make decisions for customers and stuff like that. I just want to be told what to do. Just do this. And I was like, okay, fine. Yeah, I'll do that thing. I think people really actually don't realize how refreshing that can be. Like just shutting your mind off. And so that's honestly my advice is to get some side job where you're like washing dishes or something. I mean, do some menial task. Honestly, work with your hands. Get out of your head. I had a very long before I went to India. I did a real bad job. I was a teacher at a public school right up the road from here, and I threw something at a kid. The kid could have pressed charges against me. I got fired, and I basically went and worked a grounds crew job, cutting grass and stuff after that. And I saw it very much as a punishment. Like I just, I failed society. I failed this kid. I was supposed to be his leader, and I sucked at it.
Hmm.
And honestly, that time ended up being good for me. There's a way that a debtor's prison, in a sense, can help you clear your head a little bit. And I realized that a lot of my best creative ideas were coming through those moments when I was just doing something menial. And it's so hard for people who are creative or intellectual or artistic, or maybe like video games, to do those kind of things because
Hmm.
it's like, oh, I could be doing this, could be doing this, could be, like you said, the possibility of the internet, I could be doing anything. And also, I mean, I would counsel your friend, like there's this impulse to leave, to impulse to go somewhere else. And I followed that impulse. And I try to tell people this. I try to tell people who want to become missionaries or public servants overseas or businessmen overseas. I try to tell them, look, you, I hate to say it this way, but but I think it was true of me. Because I start off with, some of my Indian audience knows this. I started off with that kind of missionary mindset that I was, but early on, I mean, my first trip over there, I realized I had no idea what I was talking about. We're talking about two different universes here, and whatever I thought in terms of my Christian understanding of the world, my 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 religious view, not just of the world, but my religious view of Christianity was wrong. I didn't even understand my own belief, and I still don't really understand this unfolding as time goes on. There are a lot of Christians who honestly wouldn't call me a Christian anymore,
Hmm.
and I don't care. I honestly just don't care. I'm an individual, so I'm just not going to be pigeonholed by your outmoded old wineskin. Like
Hmm.
whatever, you can say what you want about me, and I think too often, once again, it's just like the gun. It's just like the internet. We worship the tool. We worship the form, and we don't think about the wine. We don't think about the thing that the form is holding.
Hmm.
So I am real skeptical about the ability of people from foreign countries really being able to integrate and understand. People are asking me right now what I think of Prime Minister Modi being reelected in India,
Hmm.
and even after my 4 years there, I do have some thoughts about it, but I think I'll deal with that in a different podcast. I do have some thoughts. I think it's a sign of some interesting things happening all around the world, not just in India. But I don't really have the right to speak to it because I don't understand. Even after all my time there, speaking some, modicum of Hindi, I still just don't understand. Whenever I had that Christian missionary mindset of coming in and telling people what to believe, honestly, that even happened here. It really, my changing mind about this stuff, that when you want to change somebody, I often feel like it's really an indication that you're projecting, that you're evading something you need to change in yourself. I mean, and that's why I think the Jungian method is way better than the Christian colonizing method. I think until you've adequately gone down and figured out what's going on, all you end up doing, Jesus himself, he said this. He said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. You travel over land and sea to make a convert, and you make them twice a son of hell as yourselves." Mm-hmm. And that's what I see with the colonizing mindset. You don't understand yourself. Mm-hmm. You've cleaned the outside of the cup, but you don't know what's in your soul. And the deeper you dig, the more you realize that your God is not what you thought it was. That it's a gun, it's the internet. We all have some reduction of divinity, some God of the gaps that we actually depend on, and that we derive our value from. And yeah.
But on top of that, I think, when speaking about depression, I think that's it's perfect when you say, when you want to change somebody, it's really, you want to change there's something about yourself you want to change. And I think it's the same with depression. We've talked about on Reverse Redaction about the friend of mine that said he is against the idea of medicating depression. He says, if you feel depressed, take the day off, lay in your bed, sit in the depression and think about what's going on, because depression is an indication that something is wrong. You're right. Not that we're not fitting in, that we need to change something. Mm-hmm. We're not doing what we need to do in some way, and we're depressed about it. We're not excited about where we're at. We're out of place. Yep. And just being in it, sitting in it, is important, like to because running away from it, we're just going to continue to run down the broken path.
I really think we, in the post, it's really hard to say where all this stuff came from. Do we credit Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras, the printing press, the Reformation, the Renaissance, from a Western perspective, all our Indian audience, like a lot of those things didn't affect them. We tend to, wherever we are, and Indians are guilty of this too, we tend to look at our culture or our history as preeminent and as applying to everyone across the world. There are people in China never heard anything about Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, but came up with similar ideas. There's good evidence to suggest that a lot of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates was kind of bastardized from Zoroastrianism and from Hinduism, actually. Some of their ideas on Platonic dualism. If you look at Platonic dualism, it seems a lot like Buddhism, which has roots in Hinduism. So there's a lot of these ideas that, just because there was no internet or electricity, there was trade routes, and so a lot of this stuff got around. All that to say, I have no idea what I was saying all that about. I totally lost my train of thought. Okay, we are actually about to run out of time, so I did want to hit a couple things.
Yeah.
A Christian loves Nero.
Come on, Nero's awesome.
No, he means Nero, the Roman emperor who burned Christians. Okay, so going back to that question about depression, this week I was very depressed. All right. And again, retweets do not equal endorsements of everything a person says. I feel like I just want to say that every time I mention somebody. Like, we mentioned Brett Weinstein. That doesn't mean we identify with everything the intellectual dark web says. And when I mentioned Jordan B. Peterson, I do not say that he's God or something like that, or that he's without fault. But his podcast, episode 36, in the Significance of Biblical Stories lecture series, he's talking about Joseph. And Joseph, he's kind of starts off a little bit of a douchebag. He's a little bit tattletale, and he ends up getting sold into slavery, and he does everything right for the person he's a slave for. But then something else happens. He gets thrown in jail, and it's just like bad beat after bad beat after bad beat after bad beat, and he's in jail. And at this point, he ain't done. He's getting punished for doing the right thing. Okay. He's getting, no good deed goes unpunished for this guy. He might have been a little bit of a punk at the beginning, but by the time he's in jail, it's just like the universe is against him. And JBP likes to say this, that if you choose your pain willingly, like if you choose to face your phobia without somebody else doing it, all of a sudden you've got the momentum to get through it. And so Joseph chooses to imbue this prison with order, a place that he should be. And the next thing you know, he ends up getting favor with everybody around him. And that is something that we're all Joseph in some way or another. We're all Joseph. We've had a bad beat and we didn't deserve it. But if we can just roll with it and say, what can I learn from this? What can this adversity, think about what adversity is. When we talk about it economically, we talk about it emotionally, and we just think, oh, it's not fair. Life's not fair. I said that. Oh, I grew up all like that. I was just Mr. Justice. Like, oh, that person cheated in the sporting event. I cry about it. It's like, but that in physical fitness, the only way you get stronger is through resistance. So if we take those resistances, those things that are clearly unjust and unfair, and we take those resistances and use them to hone our will, to hone our intellect. So this week in the go to hell thing, again, just dive right in. Just go straight into it. So the go to hell thing this week is to go into the cave. So Plato had the story about the cave. I don't really remember much about it, but the general idea is these people are in the cave and all they have to do is leave. They're locked in this cave. They think, it's like they're in a prison, but the jail cell's open. All you have to do is walk straight out.
It's locked from the inside, though.
Locked from the inside. There you go. But the real hero's journey, and this is pretty across the globe. The real hero's journey is choosing to go into the cave and become one of the people in the cave, and feel what they feel, so that you can encourage them to unlock their own gate. You're free even though you're inside it. And this motif comes up all the time. It's in freaking Hannibal Lecter, the mind palace idea. Sherlock talks about a mind palace. Wherever you are, it doesn't matter what they've done to you. Your spirit is free. And you cannot control a man whose spirit is free. So to choose to go into the cave, to choose to be Sisyphus, but you don't get access to my mind. And that's what happened to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And one of the reasons that JBP constantly mentions Solzhenitsyn is that even though Solzhenitsyn didn't necessarily deserve what he got, he was part of the society that made what he got, being put in a concentration camp.
Yeah.
So he owned it. He just took the sins of his people on himself and says, I am to blame, and then got disciplined. If you do that, you change punishment to discipline. And then discipline can teach you to be a better person. Discipline, that resistance, can teach you to hone your muscles of intellect, hone your muscles of will, hone your muscles of resolve.
And even if you don't hone your muscles, even if you don't in your lifetime see success, you become part of the solution. My friend Jason brought up when we were talking about men want to build these things and we fail. He said he looks at Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah. He knew he was a prophet. He knew he would never have any success. And he was faithful, but he became part of the redemption of God's people.
If you can put yourself into the place where the suffering is happening, then you can be, affect from the inside out in a good way. So the two scenes that scare me almost more than like any horror movie. One is from October Sky. Jake Gyllenhaal. He's got this, dream of flying rockets or whatever. I think it's October Sky. I'm hoping I'm not mixing this up.
Yeah,
his dad is a coal miner. And there's a certain point in the movie where his dad gets sick and can't go into the coal mine. So Jake Gyllenhaal has to take his place, and he has to go down in. And there's this perfect shot. There's this perfect shot of Jake Gyllenhaal looking at the sky. This is his dream. His dream is to go up, not down. That's it. That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what going to hell means.
Mm-hmm.
Going down into the earth in one of the most demoralizing jobs you can think of, and making that choice to choose it willingly, you're going to come out the other side eventually, but you have to do that in the short term. The other scene is from Genius, a fantastic, I think it's National Geographic did this series. Johnny Flynn, the folk singer, he played Albert Einstein. And it's quite good. And there's this one scene where he has to be a clerk. And so he's just sitting there, doing paperwork in this army of clerks in this big, warehouse of clerks, this office building, back in the day. And here's one of the brightest minds of all time having to sit here for 2 years. And so, because he tried to get out of it. It was just like me this week. I was trying to get out of my job. And I was just, I'm not stuck in it anymore. I'm just gonna go podcast all day. Man. And this shot though is so good. It starts with him, and it's just the sound. I mean, it's almost like a Pink Floyd The Wall sort of scenario. It's like a dink, dink. People are just moving their papers and putting their stamps on it, and it just pulls out just successively shots backing out, and you're just like, this is horror for this man with this mind trapped in this building, talking paperwork and minutia. That's just like, there's nothing more oppressive than the greatest mind being forced into this trivial frivolity, but choose it. The day will come for that other stuff. Choose it in the short term. And in order to, and I'm saying, do it with menial labor. Just do it. I mean, just do it. Mm-hmm. Pick up a side job. Do it. Be talked to like you're just, some riffraff or something. Like, put yourself in that position. Like, it doesn't feel good in the moment, but the good thing? You sleep better at night. I'll tell you, because you've earned it. You don't need to go to the gym anymore. You don't need to go for a run. So that's my go to hell admonition for the week. As far as the politics stuff, we're not really going to get into that. I think I want to talk about Prime Minister Modi from a cultural perspective in a future episode, and I'm not going to comment on his rule. I'm not going to comment on his policies or anything like that. But I do want to comment on the phenomenon that's happening all around the world, where democracy has had the opposite effect of what Democrats thought it would, and that is a conservative wave all across the world. Brexit repeatedly. Someone threw a milkshake on Nigel Farage the other day, and I heard they won even bigger. It's like, well, keep throwing your milkshakes. It really seems to be working. Okay. Like,
I want to talk about that.
Yeah. And again, like India was kind of a sign of what was to come, to be honest. They was like, this Modi, he's not going to get anything. Well, okay. Apparently you don't understand how democracy works, because, and T-Series PewDiePie is another example of democracy in action. It really is. It's just the sheer numbers. PewDiePie could not compete. However, I will say this. I think democracy is an inferior form of making decisions, certain types of decisions. I don't think it works. And I think Democrats will finally come around to that the more that this happens. Because Trump is going to win 2020. They can say what they want. He's going to win 2020.
Because democracy depends on, what did you say before? The enlightened, what was it?
Best interest? No, self-interest.
Enlightened self-interest
on
and
conscious choice on rational grounds. And the problem is none of us are conscious. None of us are rational when we get into this. You know, people make a lot of fun of Modi bucks. But I'm going to tell you right now, in America, you got Trump bucks, but you don't just have Trump bucks, Trump worshipers. You don't just have Trump tards, okay?
Trumpkins.
You don't just have Trumpkins. Oh, yeah, we're not allowed to say that, are we? I keep using that and I forget. Oh, yeah, no. But you also have AOC supporters, and they're ravenously supporting her no matter how dumb a thing she says. It's like, oh, yeah, Trump says something stupid. Like, AOC has like 10 for everyone Trump does. But Trump's are self-referential. I honestly don't know at this point. Sometimes I wonder if AOC is like is trolling too. I don't know. Everything's clown world at this point. Like I cannot make a clear statement out of anything. But the point is, we become so dumb when we talk about politics. We have these really, pretty nuanced discussions about philosophy, about economic. Well, no, we can't have nuanced discussions about economics. Philosophy. We can have nuanced discussions about philosophy and Game of Thrones. But we can't have a nuanced discussion about politics. People are all bucked. Okay, just forget it. Everyone's a bucked. I mean, like, really, who in their right mind is a Rahul Gandhi bucked, right? Like, come on. That's like being a freaking John McCain bucked, like, or George W. Bush bucked. Why would you worship the son of a dynasty? Like, W was the son of a dynasty. He was
yeah. But anywho.
But anyway, who? But there are some interesting things probably to talk about in terms of social structure that I think we do need to think about. And
I would like to talk about
and why I'm not a Democrat. And why I think just the whole idea of communism, democratic approach, socialism, these things are just not tenable in a world that is very confusing.
Yeah.
And interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah, feels like politics hasn't grown out of its adolescent. No, I think it's actually regressed. I think it's literally, and this is not to disparage people with, what is the right way to say it, mental handicaps? Or how am I supposed to say it now, Judah? Politically correct way to say someone with I don't know. Special needs.
Mentally disabled?
Mentally disabled. Yeah, we're like a mentally disabled fetus at this point. In terms of our political, like, we've gone backwards. It's not even funny how bad. We're 2,600 years behind the times in terms of our political rhetorical debates.
I have people screaming at me that I'm too binary. Like, I don't know. There's something about that. Like, you're too binary. Sorry.
Our system is too binary, like every one of them. When I first got to India, I was like, wow, man, this is kind of robust. They have like a bunch of different parties and stuff like that. But then when it gets to the national level, these parties end up having alliances. And this is the problem with democracy. This is the problem. You can't have nuance because it has to be appealing to a bottom line. We need a new wineskin. We need a new wineskin for rhetoric. We need a new wineskin. And really we have it already. It's called the marketplace.
Yeah.
Vote with your dollars. Like put our money where our mouth is. Governance has got to change, and politics is just a dead meme, dude.
Yeah. So let's move on.
Let's move on
from the dead meme. I've got to go. So,
all right. So, oh man,
you have to cut out some of this stuff.
I was trying to think of my what's my sign off again? Here, I've actually expanded it. You want to hear it? This is not the current sign off, because the current sign off is, again, discipline in the short run. You go down in the cave, be disciplined now so you can dance later. That's kind of the idea.
Okay.
Be disciplined now so we can dance later. But then, for the future, are you ready for this?
Yes.
On a quest to embrace discipline in the present so I can have the center of gravity in the future to learn the dynamic yet disciplined dance of robust yet resilient, strong yet agile, adept yet thorough, nuanced yet decisive, maneuverable yet principled, eternally prepared yet temporally invested, transcendent yet imminent, inventive yet prudent, independent integrity. How is that, baby?
Yes.
Is that multifaceted enough for you?
That's definitely...
Until a politician can talk like that, he ain't got nothing on the surfing violinist. That's why I don't care about any of these people, because they're not as smart in the public as I am. They're as smart in the private as me. They're smarter than me in the private because they've made money, and I have not. That's how you know that they're better than me. But when it comes to their political debate, just forget it. I'm not going to sit there and kiss the toes of somebody who just again like throws crap at one another on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, forget it.
Nah.
All right, so Hush, thanks again. Another 20-pound donation. Have a good week for it. I look forward to hearing your thoughts next week, and we will check out the Brett Weinstein TED Talk. I look forward to doing that. We are going to be back in a few minutes for Reverse Redaction, and it's going to be the Great Game of Thrones Showdown.
Bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. I actually thought about doing like a whole little intro for it. Like,
all right.
We put Jared's face on like a Drogon and just have him like burning all of the people support Jared.
Oh, mercy. All right. Well, I've got to step out for a couple minutes and say goodbye to some friends, and I'll be right back.
All right. Godspeed, everyone. Thank you all. Thank you again, Harsh Joshi, for supporting the podcast. Starting next week, we will begin Patreon support. So if you do want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/thesurfingviolinist for more of this all over the place intellectual incendiariness. Thank you.